Using a callback allows us in JavaScript to control the sequence of when that function is called. And a callback, we can call a function with a callback and let that function run as the callback of the application. So let's give a quick example of how callbacks work. And callbacks are essentially passing in a request to invoke a function from another function. So to provide a quick and simple example is that let's set up a few functions. And typically when we have a function, we can set within the code when we want to invoke that function. So if we have a function, we can just call this output. And this function is going to be requiring a callback. So essentially this is going to be the function that we're going to request from another function, and it's going to be requiring that callback function, so whatever the name of that callback function is, and we can set that value within the code. So basically invoking that callback function, and let's create a couple functions. So the first function is going to output into the console log first, and we can also pass in a value. I use the backticks for the template literals. So if we do have a value, we can add that value, whatever the value is. And let's create a few other functions. So create a second function and a third function, and we'll just name them 2 and 3. And in order to distinguish between the functions, so we'll output different text into the console and save that. So let's create some callbacks, and the function is essentially taking the function as an argument when it's calling that information back. So we can call to the output function and pass in a value to that output function as a value of 1. And if we don't want to pass in a value into it, it's going to pass a value of Laurence. So this is going to take the value, and then with the value we can use in the callback function. So we get an output of Laurence for the first one, and we can specify which functions we want to use within the callback and have multiple functions, so we can run whatever function we want with the value by invoking it. And essentially we're using the output function as our main function and then setting the callback function that we want to use within the request arguments of the function that's triggering and being invoked. And that also allows us to pass through values, and we can pass in as many arguments as we want into the functions that we're calling, as long as the structure is the same, where we are expecting an argument and we're outputting it as a value called val.